What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our top 5 most undervalued wide receivers for the 2021 fantasy football season. Basically, these are the guys per quote-unquote consensus rankings that are just ranked way too low and in reality have a great chance of exceeding expectations, bettering their projections, and being successful across all formats. So make sure to tune in. And if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Let us hear it in the comments section. Do you agree, disagree? What other wide receivers would you put on this list as well? And lastly, go ahead, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide, now available for purchase on alldaypigskin.com. Has everything you can want from top 150 overall player rankings in standard and PPR formats to individual player bios, tiers, projections, and general fantasy advice. All the details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And we look at our list here in terms of ADPs across several different platforms. And quick note, this is based on PPR, so keep that in mind. But the number one guy on our list here is Michael Thomas. And Thomas, let's be honest, burned a lot of people in 2020. In fact, he might have been the most disappointing wide receiver bar none, because coming off of 2019 where he was a record setter and he was the consensus number one overall wide receiver to be taken last season, he did not deliver. But if you look at why that was the case, well, it's pretty simple, and it's not really Michael Thomas's fault. It's because he was injured numerous times throughout the season. There was quarterback instability, and Michael Thomas didn't really take the field all that often due to that. So with that being the case, when we fast forward to 2021, we know it's going to either be Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill at quarterback, and that Michael Thomas is healthy. Well, he should be back in the conversation for at least a top 5 wide receiver. And especially in PPR scoring, the fact that he's 9th overall here per these averages, almost outside of the top 10, to me is absolutely crazy. He is the unquestioned number one target on that offense. There really isn't anybody else to take away volume from him. It's just him and Alvin Kamara. And the best thing about Michael Thomas, other than the fact that you can get him at a discount because of recency bias, is that whoever wins the quarterback job, whether it's Winston or Hill, I believe that Michael Thomas will still remain that wide receiver one and be a wide receiver one for fantasy football purposes because, yes, he has a higher ceiling in terms of receiving yardage with Jameis Winston, no question about it. But even while Taysom Hill was the quarterback last season and Michael Thomas had some overlap with him while they played together, we saw Taysom Hill go pretty much exclusively to Michael Thomas, and he had a lot of success. What we're trying to say is he has a very high floor with either one of these quarterbacks. Yes, it would be better if Jameis Winston is the guy because he has higher upside, and he could have a bunch of blow-up games like a Tyreek Hill and a Devontae Adams. But even if he doesn't, he still has that consistency that you want. You know, a consistency that we might see guys like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Justin Jefferson struggle with. That's why I would have him ranked above those guys. To me, that's what makes a great fantasy wide receiver. Someone that's putting up good numbers, but is also doing it consistently. And pretty much other than last year, that was Michael Thomas. He was doing it on a consistent basis, which is one of the best things you can ask for. And if you look at 12-team leagues, you can probably get Michael Thomas at the beginning of the 3rd round, which is an absolute steal. I would have no problem drafting him as a top 5 wide receiver. So pretty much at the beginning of the 2nd round, that's how highly I value him. And I would take advantage of this discount while you still can. But moving on to our number 2 wide receiver on this list, we scroll down all the way to the number 22 guy here. That is Cooper Kupp. And again, I have no idea where Cooper Kupp is ranked this low. In my opinion, he should be right next to Robert Woods, regardless of the format, because Woods and Cooper Kupp are pretty much the identical player. The only thing that is probably going to be the biggest difference is the touchdowns. But that's so variable to begin with that you don't know if Robert Woods is going to have a decline in that category or Cooper Kupp is going to increase. And then that's going to be the reason why he finishes higher than Robert Woods. if you take out the touchdowns last season, Woods and Cooper Kupp pretty much had almost identical stats in terms of receptions and yardage. And now with Matthew Stafford in town, that shouldn't change all that much. What should change is their ceiling and that it should increase. So I feel like Cooper Kupp should be higher than several names on this list. For example, I'd have him higher than a Chris Godwin or a Mike Evans or probably a DJ Moore as well. So right now, Robert Woods, just as a comparison, is probably going to be going somewhere in the 4th round. If you can get Cooper Kupp a round later, for example, which I see very often, even though some people are coming around to it and realizing, oh yeah, we should probably have Cooper Kupp be drafted right after Robert Woods. But if you can take advantage of that type of value, you should absolutely do so. I love Cooper Kupp. He's a guy that's going to get peppered with targets, so he's a good PPR value. He's in an offense with the Rams that has a lot of firepower. They have a very good defense, so that's going to translate into more scoring opportunities for their offense. He's in a great situation. I think his upside is probably a low-end wide receiver 1, but a pretty safe high-end wide receiver 2, which is for the most part, the exact same situation for Robert Woods. So I would be drafting those guys right in tandem, right one after the other. So as things remain, Cooper Kupp, great value if you're getting him outside of a top 20 wide receiver. But again, moving on, and now we scroll down this list a little bit more to Tyler Lockett here at number 24. So only a couple of spots lower than Cooper Kupp. And to some extent, I understand why Tyler Lockett is ranked, almost outside of the top 25 wide receivers, because in PPR formats, he is hard to trust. He is probably a guy that is more suited for best ball purposes. He's definitely got some boom or bust tendencies, but he's still someone that can lead the Seattle Seahawks in receptions, which in fact he actually did last season, despite the fact that DK Metcalf was so dominant. But Tyler Lockett is, again, I would probably put him in that category of a Cooper Kupp, but just a little bit less consistent, which is the worry. I would have him higher ranked in standard scoring, though, so do keep that in mind. I kind of understand that in PPR formats, he might lose some value because, again, those Seattle wide receivers don't exactly get as many consistent targets as some of these other counterparts here, because the problem with the Seattle Seahawks is offensively, they go through these amazing stretches where they're absolutely unstoppable. All the wide receivers are excelling. Russell Wilson is an MVP candidate, but then all of a sudden, they kind of go cold. There's inconsistencies from Wilson, from the wide receivers, and that's when we get in trouble with Tyler Lockett or even DK Metcalf, which is why I think pretty much 20 spots lower compared to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett is a very good value. I like his yardage upside. I like his chances to lead the team in receptions, or, even if he comes in at second, I don't think it'll be that big of a separation point between himself and DK Metcalf. Yes, Metcalf probably has the higher touchdown upside because of just that big body and that physical nature. But Tyler Lockett, again, he's got that big play ability and is still one of the favorite targets for Russell Wilson. So I'd have no problem taking him. I've seen him last until the 5th round in drafts, and that's probably even in standard drafts, which is, to me, an even better value. So considering where he is being ranked and valued right now, I think Tyler Lockett is a very good buy low candidate that is just, unfortunately, a little bit undervalued. But now scrolling down a bunch on this list, we go all the way down to the 48th player, Antonio Brown of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I've been screaming about this since God knows how long, but it's got to have been for 3-4 months now. Pretty much as soon as last year's fantasy season ended, I said, as long as Antonio Brown ends up back on the Bucs, and it's that same wide receiver group, he will by far, and it's not even close, be the best value out of all these wide receivers. Because I'm going to quickly scroll up here to show you how highly Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are ranked in PPR. Mike Evans, 13th overall. That's absolutely insane. That should not be the case. This is PPR. He should not be a top 15 wide receiver in PPR. Chris Godwin, 17th overall. That's probably a little bit more appropriate. But in PPR formats, Chris Godwin is going to be the number one wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But at number 2, I would have Antonio Brown, and not that far behind. Because here's the situation. Right now, the Bucs have 3 great wide receivers on their team. 2 of them, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, are being valued as guys that can be wide receiver ones. That shouldn't be the case. All these wide receivers for Tampa Bay should be regarded as pretty much the same player, and that is a low-end wide receiver too. And yes, I realize that's not as exciting as a top 15 or a top 20 wide receiver, but that's still good value. And the fact that you can get a low-end to mid-level wide receiver too, and Antonio Brown in, probably the 8th, 9th, 10th round, again, you see him here ranked almost outside of the top 50 wide receivers, is an absolute travesty. He should be ranked right after Chris Godwin or, right next to Mike Evans, wherever it is. But the fact that there's such a huge gap in between those 3 guys, specifically Antonio Brown and the other 2, makes zero, and I mean 0 sense. Tom Brady has chemistry with Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown can still deliver. He can still burn opposing defenders, and probably, the opposing defenses are going to focus in on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, so that's going to open things up for Antonio Brown. There are too many mouths to feed on Tampa Bay, so there will be inconsistent performances, which is, I feel like the issue is people took that into account for Antonio Brown when kind of ranking him, but then just didn't do so for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which shouldn't be the case, and which is why none of those guys will be a wide receiver one on this offense unless there's an injury where then they're going to get a lot more volume. But here, basically, the thing is, take advantage of this undervaluing that we're seeing with Antonio Brown. Yes, he's older. Yes, he's had some issues off the field, but when he's on the field with Tom Brady, he delivers. And right now, considering that we don't expect too much difference in terms of receptions, yardage, touchdowns between those 3 guys, Antonio Brown is by far and away the best value. You can get him so many rounds later. Instead of paying up for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in like the end of the 3rd, 4th round, wait until the 8th, 9th round, get Antonio Brown, and you did just as well. So just trust us on this one. Antonio Brown is going to be probably across all of fantasy football, unless somehow his ADP jumps up 20 or 30 spots between now, August, and or September. Again, the best value at the wide receiver position. But concluding here with our 5th name on this list, we scroll down all the way to number 61, and that is Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons. And obviously, this is a result of the trade of Julio Jones. And you'll see some people have him ranked higher than others. One platform has him ranked as high as the number 49th wide receiver, another platform as low as the 82nd overall wide receiver. And, that averages out to number 61 overall here on this list, which I would disagree with. Pretty much as soon as Julio Jones was shipped out of Atlanta, I had Russell Gage as a top 50 wide receiver, and honestly, probably top 40 wide receiver, especially in PPR. And this is the reason why. The Atlanta Falcons pretty much year after year are a top 5 offense with pass attempts as far as that's concerned. So there's going to be a lot of volume to go around with Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, and Kyle Pitts. Now, the reason Russell Gage is ranked so low is because naturally people are the most excited about for Calvin Ridley, because now he has a chance to be the wide receiver one in fantasy football with Julio Jones gone. We saw it last season, and there's no reason why that shouldn't continue. And then second of all, people are the most excited for Kyle Pitts because he's this, tight end that's once in a generation type of talent that can play the wide receiver position. He's going to be the next great tight end. Yes, that's perfectly fine. I get that. I love the talent as well. But let's keep in mind that rookie tight ends usually take a little bit to get used to things. I'm not saying that, Kyle Pitts won't be great, but also how will the Atlanta Falcons play Kyle Pitts? Are they going to play him as a prototypical tight end, or are they going to play him at one of the wide receiver positions, which is also possible? We don't have that answer. And I would guess that he'd play the more prototypical tight end position. even though, again, uh, he has enough talent to be a wide receiver. But the big takeaway here is that Russell Gage is kind of the forgotten name. And last season, when Julio Jones wasn't available, Russell Gage stepped up in a big way. He got a lot of opportunities and he delivered. And I think now, again, he's got a little bit more experience, a little bit more chemistry with Matt Ryan than Kyle Pitts, who, again, will do his thing. But at least to begin the season, I think Russell Gage will have some tremendous value. And he'll be the number 2 wide receiver on this offense, which is, again, so valuable in terms of fantasy football. The NFC South is a gold mine for huge passing performances, for a lot of points being scored, which translates to a lot of fantasy success. I would 1000% be on the bandwagon of having Russell Gage as a top 50 wide receiver. I think he, again, is probably a low-end wide receiver 2 at worst. There's no way he should be outside of the top 60. You can get him in double-digit rounds, probably in the 10th, 11th round on your bench. But in reality, he can be a solid flex play every single week. So with that being the case, I would take advantage of this situation. Again, before we get to August or September, where I wouldn't be surprised if his value is going up boards. So take advantage of Russell Gage while you still can. And with that, we wrap up this breakdown of our top 5 most undervalued wide receivers for this 2021 fantasy football season. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree? What are some other guys you would put in this category? If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe. Again, get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Everything you could want at a great value. Details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.